Welcome. Good morning. Today we have an unusual setting. Here at this forum, we have had a number of ISIS public forums on all kinds of issues, big and small, geopolitics, ASEAN, US, China, South China Sea, the Mekong region, some Thai domestic politics, but we have not had a forum on Thai education. But we talk about it a lot. So I've been inspired by some of the comments made last time by Dr. Kirida, the Finnish ambassador too, about, and we talk about education. If I get 10 baht for every comment made on Thai education, I'd be a rich man. And everybody has a view. So it's an unusual setting because we have 6 speakers. Normally our templates are one main speaker, a keynote speaker, main lecturer, and then moderator, and then or 4 plus 1, 4 speakers plus a moderator. But this time, because we want to get a diversity of views, both domestic and from foreign experts, we have 6 speakers. In fact, we had to rent this podium because the university didn't provide us a big enough podium. And I hope that the podium will hold and will not collapse. I'm sorry that it's a bit squeezed, a bit tight. But we have a good lineup today. I would begin by saying that Thailand is not the only country that has education problems. Anybody, I talk to friends and they say, oh, we have education problems. I don't know if Finland does, but my American friends, they say they have education problems. My UK friends, they say they have education problems. And I'm sure if I asked my Irish friend, our Irish ambassador, please sit up here, Brendan. He would say that Ireland also has education problems. So Thailand is not the only one. But I think that for Thailand, our educational shortcomings are now kind of critical because it's holding back a number of fronts, a number of ideas, issues, policies that we need to move ahead on. So you can see that I put up a little teaser. It's a movie. It's a Thai movie. Now Thai movies are not always great. It's better in recent years. But this one is interesting. It's about Thai education. It has subtitles. I don't know who made this movie. I don't know the screenwriter. I don't know any of the actors. I went to see the movie because my daughter took me. But it's a good movie about the problems that we have. There are 2 types of education in Thailand. This movie is about the typical common Thai education. And I know well from my students. One way to reduce my class enrollment, and this happens every term, is to require a research paper. They dropped it just like that. They want to take a test. You learn, you take a class, and then you take a test. So this movie is very much about test taking and how you can do well in test taking. And if you don't have the skills, you can hire test takers. In the middle of the movie, I won't give it away, but there comes a point when she said, this expert test taker said, well, now that we're done with test taking, you're going to universities now, you don't need me. Because when you go to America, universities, they have essays, papers. They don't take multiple choice tests. So this is the dilemma for Thai education. I mean, fundamentally here I can see it over the last 24 years. Students like to take tests because the way they study for tests is to memorize. I've been told by a British friend who has children going to Eton that there they also focus on tests. I mean, you have it comes time to take a test, you have to know how to take a test. But they also focus on learning. There's learning for learning, and there's learning to take a test. So in Thailand, I think we have mostly learning to take a test. Now, we have 6 experts. I thank all of them for joining us here. We have 3 Thais and 3 Farang, if I may say, from a British perspective, a German perspective, a American perspective. But we will begin you have the bios and so on, and I'll just go down the line one by one. They can speak for 15 to 20 minutes. They have some of them have PowerPoint, some don't. It's fine. We'll make sure to leave some room at the end for some questions and comments. Our first speaker is Dr. Kirida. Dr. Kirida is an economist, formerly with World Bank and now with Thailand Development Research Institute. She has a PhD from Cornell. She's a very attractive and appealing speaker because she presents very well. And so she makes it very natural for us to kick off with. So Dr. Kirida, you have the podium.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to be back here again. For those of you who were here last month, I was also here speaking about the Thailand 4.0. So I feel a little responsible because at that session, we did talk a bit about education, but we didn't do it enough justice. So I think I was the one who raised those issues. So I feel a little responsible. So here I am. I'm back here again today to give you an overview of how an economist sees education and the importance of it in achieving what we call inclusive growth. So I think in Thailand and in any other countries in the world, why is education important? Right? It's important because it promotes growth in the country, right? When your labor force is skilled. But secondly, it also promotes equity among the citizens of the country as well. And that's a good thing in itself. So I consider education as one of the necessary conditions for inclusive growth. And this is not easy to achieve. Equitable education, because I guess as Dr. Thitinan says, in many countries, including in Thailand, there is disparities in the quality of education, especially among different regions of the country, lagging regions, more advanced regions, and the challenge here is how to bridge that gap, right? So, as I mentioned last month, for those of you here, if you look at the PISA scores for Thailand, for example, the scores for students in Bangkok is equivalent to the average of the United States, right? And I went to Cornell, and it's a good system, but not as good as Finland. But it's respectable. But it's the rest of the country outside Bangkok that is really trailing behind, and it really pulls the average of Thailand down. So this is not easy to remedy. And again, today what I'm going to try to do is to mention about some of these issues and also give some quick wins that the TDRI has done some research on to see what can be done quickly. And of course, the more difficult, more in-depth problems, I'll let the other speakers deal with them because they are the education specialists here. So first, let me begin by saying why is it important for Thailand to really step up its education quality, right? First of all, we know that our labor force is aging and it's falling. So in the next 20 years, we will have a 10% decline in our labor force. So either we do import more labor, skilled labor into the country, or we improve the quality of the existing labor force. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to grow, right? When you're old and you're not skilled. So this is one of the very important reasons, why we want to improve education as well. So let me talk about the growth side first, then I'll talk about the equity side, right? But when we actually look at the labor productivity in Thailand, right? It's a bit sad to see that our productivity, no matter what it's in industry, service, or agriculture, is quite low, and it's low compared to other countries as well, especially in agriculture. It's super low. Service is a little bit better, and industry is the best, but still it's way below those of Singapore or Malaysia. So we are really concerned because we're going to have fewer people to work, and the productivity is not increasing anytime fast. It's going to be a big constraint to growth in the future. So when we look at where we are weak in terms of competitiveness, again here I took the data from the World Economic Forum, and again we see here the ones I've circled. They're all about human capital, right? Which is weak compared to the East Asian average. So again here it's about growth, it's about competitiveness. While we're concerned about the education quality of the Thai citizens. When we ask businesses, right? Some of you here are from the business sector, and this will probably ring a bell to you. Firms would say, well, today they say that political issues might be the most concern they have, but the second major concern is on skill shortages, meaning that they can't find the skills that they need, either because they aren't there or there's a mismatch. So this is actually a big constraint to growth, of the business sector in this country. And then, Thailand is driven a lot by the private sector. The government sector is a small sector here. So if the private sector has been voicing that this is a problem, and this is a survey that has been done for several years now. I've taken just 2 years here to show you. It's always, one of the top three, right? Lack of skilled labor. So not only that, lack of skilled labor, impedes operations of businesses, it also impedes innovation of businesses, right? When we look at the research and development funds that Thai private sector uses, it's minuscule, right? It's 0.25% of GDP, right? It's right down below. And when we ask firms, why aren't you, innovating? And here, innovation means you can either do just marketing innovation or, product innovation. It doesn't have to be, laboratory hard work. And the reason it was given, which is to my surprise, it's not only about money, right? High cost is one, but the equal number of firms reply that it's because they can't find the people to do so. So, this has implications for innovation by the private sector in Thailand as well. So, this is just to whet your appetite on what the issues, what the constraints are, in Thailand. Why is it important to have a more skilled labor force? So let me then now show you the difference between the education quality, as I mentioned earlier, in Thailand, right? So if we really want to uplift the quality of labor in Thailand, we would have to uplift the quality of education of those people as well. But when we look at the data, whether it be from the UNDP, it be from the World Bank, it be from the Thai authorities, they all point to the same direction. That is, those outside of Bangkok have weaker performances, right? Whether you measure it from the PISA scores or from the ONET scores, any test scores, it will show you that outside Bangkok is pretty weak. And here it's really I don't know if I should call frightening, but in village students, almost half of the village students who have participated in the PISA test in 2012 are functionally illiterate, right? So they can't really read and write. So half of them compared to 16% in Bangkok, which is not small, but we do really have an issue here on the quality of education. And if you actually look at the gaps between the students, as I mentioned, in the villages and in the cities, you can see that the scores are very different, right? The height of the bars are the scores. And they have not increased much over the 10 years of the PISA testing from 2003 to 2012. If you segregate the data by incomes of students, it's really starting, that those in the bottom 40%, the poorest students, have a much lower scores than the rest of the students as well. So there is a lot of disparity, and the important thing is, how do we bridge them? One of the reasons that a lot of research has been done on this, and they found that one of the reasons for the disparity of the outcomes, education outcomes, of those in Bangkok and outside Bangkok comes from the fact that there are lots of small schools, especially outside of Bangkok. And small schools here, I mean schools that have fewer than 20 students per grade, right? So that means that from grade 1 to grade 6, there's only 120 students at most, right? And the reason is that small schools receive small budget, which means that they can only hire a few teachers and they can only afford maybe one or two computers. So this really is a problem, because it then feeds back to the quality of the education. A third of all schools, classes in Thailand, schools here I'm talking about primary and secondary education, a third of all school classes have fewer than one teacher per class, which means one teacher would have to teach more than one class. So one teacher would teach both math, Thai, physical education, everything. So, you can't expect the quality to be very good in small schools. And the reason why we have so many small schools today is because the number of students have been falling, right? We're aging, so the number of students have been falling, but the number of schools have not declined, right? So each school now has fewer and fewer students, and this is really costly for the government, for the Ministry of Education, and also the quality also suffers in this case. One of the quick wins that research from the World Bank and TDRI has pointed is that we could merge these schools, and we found that there are so many schools that are close to each other, so many small schools that are close to each other, or they're close to bigger schools. So actually, if we can merge these small schools, which is the big part, the big yellow part, with the larger schools which are nearby, we can have more, big schools which could provide better teachers and also better quality of facilities to them. In addition to that, we will be able to reduce the number of classes that I mentioned earlier that has fewer than one teacher per class. So that's good for students as well. And because the schools are so close by to each other, if you merge them, you can provide school buses for students, and that probably saves the ministry a lot of money because they don't have to run another school with another school director, and right, and running a whole building, which is pretty costly. So I think this is one of the quick wins that can be achieved. I mean, the government is trying to do something about it, and maybe Dr. Pumsaran can talk more about it, but it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy because school directors have been resisting as well, right? And as you know, teachers and school directors in the provinces are pretty powerful. They are respected, and they also provide votes to politicians as well, so they can influence the local community there. So it isn't easy to do that, but so far I was told that only 200 schools have been merged out of 16,943 schools. So that's one issue about primary and secondary education I think could be a quick win. Of course, there are others about teachers training, using digital technology. I'll let the other speakers speak to that because those are more in-depth issues and require a more long-term approach to that. Well, now I've talked about primary and secondary education, but equally important, and Dr. Pumsaran can attest to this because he did a research on preschool education, right? And with TDRI. And it actually shows that, regardless of the quality of the primary and secondary school education, if your kids, do not go to preschool, they tend to perform less well than those who have attended preschool. So, the gap in preschool attendance, as you can see here, is also very different between those who are, students from poorer families vis-a-vis students from richer families. So students from poor families, cannot afford to attend preschool, and this affects their performance and their, their ability to learn later on in their lives. And when we actually look at the number of, so when we talk about preschool, usually Thai parents will send their children to what they call the childhood development centers, right? And this is run, I think by the Department of Health or Department of Social Welfare, right? So, these students, if they get to go to these childhood development centers, well, 67 of them do not pass, the quality benchmark that, that has been set by the department, actually by the UNICEF. And this is a survey that's done by the Department of Health. So there's an issue of access and there's an issue of quality as well in the preschool education. And a lot of research has shown that preschool education really give high returns to students later on in their lives. So this is also another issue. We have to start early. That's the point I want to make. And actually we need to start even earlier because when children are from 0 to 5 years old, that's when their brains start to develop, right? And if you don't develop your brains at that point, it's very difficult to develop after that. And we found that and here we, I mean, the Matidon University, found that 16% of Thai children under the age of 5 are stunted, which means they're short for their age. And this is important because stuntedness implies that they've had malnutrition or lack of nutrition, or they've had some disease in the first 1,000 days of their lives. So this really impacts their ability to learn later on in their lives. So 16% of Thai children are stunted. In the Northeast, 19%, so almost 1/5 of them are stunted. So it's difficult for those in the Northeast to then catch up later in life because their IQ, their EQs are below those of others in the country. And this is a survey that is done by the Department of Mental Health as well that actually shows that the EQ and IQ of those in Northeast are indeed lower than those in the other parts of the country. So here it's important to give education to parents either on nutrition, on how to take care of the children if they're sick, and also later on maybe some support to put their children, especially for the poorer families, in preschool. So I think here we have to start early, in doing so. So now that I've talked about, the development from, age of 0, I would say, to secondary education and what I see as the quick wins, let me just touch a little bit of vocational education because we have a speaker today who will speak on vocational education, and I'd just like to give you a little overview on that. So once students go up to secondary education, they can choose whether they want to go to vocational education or finish grade 12 and then go to undergrad institutions, right? So for those who go to vocational education, we found that the rate is falling. I'm sorry, the slides are in Thai, but I will explain it to you because these are the ones that we have used in our annual symposium last year when we had a symposium on education and public services. So the numbers have been the target is that the target is that in 2015 there should be 51% of students enrolled in vocational education versus 49 in undergrad, but in reality that's not the case, right? Only 32% of students actually go into vocational education, and this number is falling, right? And we know that one of the reasons is because parents do not feel comfortable sending their children to vocational education because there's lots of violence, there's news about it, or it's considered as second class, right, education compared to undergrad. Well, if it's second class, there has been attempts to actually upgrade it by giving options. This is by the government, by the Ministry of Education, that you could then go to take 2 years of vocational education, then take 4 years in university, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and you can get a diploma, right, which is equivalent to an undergrad degree. So that resolves some of this prestige, issue. But I think one of the underlying more fundamental issue is that when students graduate from vocational school, they feel that their career path and their ability to make income is not as high as those that that graduate from university. Which one of the things that the government, as well as I know the Federation of Thai Industries has started to do, is to pair up vocational schools with businesses so that they have apprenticeship programs that would allow these students to then find good jobs, and have the skills that the business sector needs as well. So the apprenticeship program is there, but unfortunately in Thailand, for some reason, it's not widespread. Only, less than 5%, about 5% of Thai vocational schools, have apprenticeship programs, right? Compared to almost 100% in Denmark. So, there is a big difference here. It's a good program, as I mentioned, but it's not widespread. And one of the reasons why it's not widespread is because there isn't any systematic facilitation, of this apprenticeship program at the moment. So it's school by school. Individual schools will go and try to pair up with businesses or contact the Federation of Thai Industries to try to set this program, but nobody actually systematically facilitates, monitor, evaluate, or do quality checks on these. So schools are pretty much stretched in doing this. Finding students who are disciplined, who will come to work, and so these issues really deter businesses from participating in this as well. So I think that's unfortunate, because whenever we do firm surveys, many firms will say the most lacking skills are those from vocational graduates, right? They really lack vocational graduates, but they can't find them. So this is another issue. If Thailand were to go to Thailand 4.0, we would not only need scientists and engineers, but we will also need a good group of vocational school graduates as well. So I think I've exhausted my time, probably passed the time allocated to me. So let me stop there for the time being. Dr. Titinan, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kirida. Look, you've exceeded time again, but it's been worth every minute again. Very comprehensive, and I think from your studies, and I would also cite Dr. Somkiat Tankitwaneda TDRI. So TDRI has done a number of studies on Thai education reforms and so on. And you can access their website. I think they have some published materials. But Dr. Kirida, these are all the problems that we know. It's very frustrating. But from your findings and studies, is there like some key recommendations that, what would be the one or two things that you would do or your studies have shown that should be done?
Well, on the issue of, let's say, the preschool education. So let me start from the youngest age to the oldest age. For the preschool education, it is actually shown that it's mostly the students from the poorer families that do not have access to preschool. So, one of the recommendations that TDRI has made is that we should target those families, by giving them incentives or hiring them to send their kids to school, to preschool. But at the same time, improving the quality of the preschools themselves, right? These child development centers are important. But of course, firstly, try to get parents to send their kids to preschool first. So giving them incentives, either by subsidies, or other methods would be one. At the level of, sorry, let me just step back. At the level of being, even before going to school, right, 0 to 5 years of age, there has been a study that has, shown that a lot of students or children in the Northeast has a lower IQ and they have health issues. One of the reasons is because they lack iodine, and iodine is found in sea salt, right? And iodine actually helps brains to build until the age of 5. The lack of iodine impedes that process, and once you're above 5 years old, there's no remedy for that. So iodine is cheap. It's probably 1 baht per bag of salt if added to it, and it can actually help improve the way the brain develops as well. Of course, that's one thing, and of course educating especially mothers in how to take care of their children and how to also treat the children when they're ill is quite important. Take them to have vaccines, or if they're ill, make sure they get to the hospital in time. That, of course, also helps, with the development of a child's health as well. So education of mothers is also quite important. When we come to the, sorry, it's a bit long. When it comes to the primary and secondary school, the quick win, as I mentioned, is to probably merge the schools together. Merging itself is good, but that's not enough. In our studies, we also show that school accountability is very important. You can have nice big schools, but if the director is not accountable, because none of the school performance are being disclosed to parents, right, which is the way it is now. Test scores are not disclosed, for example. It won't help, right? So accountability of schools, of teachers, of school directors would also help promote, better quality of education at the primary and secondary school level. At the vocational school level, of course, having an apprenticeship program, having a facilitator, that is serious about matching, the businesses with the vocational schools would very much help promote the apprenticeship in Thailand. I think those are the quick wins that
Thank you very much. Multi-layered, multifaceted, many problems. Also, from your presentation, you can see that you can also make the argument that this is really the root of Thailand's political polarization as well. The political adversity we've had over the last decade. Our next speaker is Dr. Pumsaran. I've known Dr. Pumsaran for some time. He has a PhD from Stanford, directly in the field of education. And he works at the Education Ministry. And I see his work, and I am frustrated for him because someone like him should come back and do a lot of things. But the Education Ministry, we almost have to kind of destroy it, really. Right? Creative destruction, almost have to dismantle it and rebuild it again because it's such a huge bureaucracy, very entrenched and very difficult to change. So from your perspective, I know you've done some lectures as well. From inside, what do you think?
Okay, so I think it's very hard for me to talk in 15 minutes about the whole issue of education in Thailand, maybe from Ministry of Education perspective. So I think I will just touch on some issues, not every, just some important issue. Maybe a lot of issues Dr. Kirida also said, and maybe some vocational. We have some experts from the country, and Dr. Rattana is also an expert on the higher education, on university. So I think I will just talk on the rest of the issue. So first, as a person from the Ministry of Education, I think in Thai society, recently, the Ministry of Education has been blamed quite a bit that we received a lot of budget compared to the other ministry, and for in the past maybe at least 10 years. I think in the past 10 years at least, our budget at the ministry is around 20% of the national budget. It's like it is the most money consuming, budget consuming ministry in Thailand. But people also often criticize us that why we have increasing budget every year, however, why our test score or maybe international test score or domestic test score like O-net or N-net, V-net, something like that, has been declined. So what's wrong with that? What's wrong with our budget? Or whether we have done it, used it ineffectively, or what is the leak? So I will talk a little bit about the education budget. So you can see that in the past 10 years, the education budget has been increased around maybe twofold. However, the test score like PISA or TIM has been declining every year. Even the last round of PISA is PISA 2015. Thailand even received the lower marks than the previous round of 2012. But I didn't put it in this graph. So you can see that the more we spend on education, the less outcome we have. So what's wrong? And one of the reason for increasing budget for Ministry of Education is quite obvious. The obvious thing is that we have increased the teacher salary in the past 10 years. So now teacher salary in Thailand is quite high compared to other government officers. Actually, teacher salary is even higher than my salary compared to the same position, because it has the different system of the salary. It has the unique system of teacher salary. So if you wonder, in case you wonder why the Ministry of Education's budget has been increased in the past 10 years, because the increase of teacher salary, and you will notice that it's very responsive to the economic incentive. Like in the maybe 10 years, 20 years ago, not many students want to take entrance exam in the Faculty of Education because maybe low prestige, or maybe because they do not have a high salary. But nowadays, the Faculty of Education has become quite popular among the students who want to enter in Thai university. So if you look at the education budget of Thailand, like in terms of the GDP or in terms of the percent of annual budget, we can say that Thailand does not lag behind any country. Actually, we are quite at the forefront compared to other countries. Like we have 20% of annual budget and around 4% of GDP that's spent on the education. However, if you look by another metric, which I think is quite makes sense more than just use the ratio of the annual budget or spending. So if you look at this graph, this is the data from the OECD that show the budget, the education budget per head or per capita of a student adjusted by the PPP or purchasing power parity. They try to adjust the economy of our country to be the same. So by this standard, you will see that in Thailand, actually we do not spend that much money per student when you compare to other countries. So you see that the more country that spend the per head budget on student, the higher test score, in this case is PISA 2015, will be. So it's quite correlated. So I found it very interesting, and it's quite refutes the idea that we have been believed quite for a long time that Thailand spend a lot on education. It spend a lot really, but when you translate it into the per head of student and compare to other countries, it's quite moderate. It's not that much. So this is the same thing. But in this case, there is one country that is very unique. That one is the Vietnam. Vietnam has a very the government of Vietnam spend lower per head of student than Thailand and than many countries. But the test score of a Vietnamese student is quite high. It's like comparable to like a student from the East Asian country or maybe some European country or like even Finland. This is quite amazing, I think. And I urge our people from the Ministry of Education to take a look very seriously in the case of Vietnam, because Vietnam, they spend less on education, have poorer maybe socio-economic status of students compared to Thai students, yet they still manage to perform very well. So this is the case that we should look upon. And I think we just keep. So this is like the status of the education system in Thailand. Usually it's been ranked quite low when compared to other countries. Like in this case, in 2014, from the Pearson ranking, the education system has been ranked like 35 out of 40 countries. And if you look at the English language, the skill of Thai students ranked by the ES, it's like a private language company, from 2011 to 2015. So we've been at the lowest end of the spectrum compared to those other countries. Or the TOEFL, the average TOEFL score of Thai students in 2013, we've been ranked 57 out of 61 countries, so it's pretty low for the English. And this is some fun picture that I like to share. I always share. It's like the problem that Thai teacher that I told you previously, that Thai teacher have received quite a lot of salary, and even higher than university professor these days, minus the research funding that the university professor received. If you compare only the salary, the university professor even receive lower than the high school teacher, and sometimes the university professor come to the Ministry of Education to protest that why we receive lower salary than a primary school teacher. And Okay, this is the distribution of a test score that correspond to Dr. Kirida's previous presentation. That in the red is the province where there is a low test score on the ONET. So you will see that the province at the in the border province, like in the southernmost or in the north or northeastern country, northeastern province, they usually receive a much lower ONET or test score, national test score compared to the other province. This is one of the, you can see it's like the inequality in terms of the education standard among different provinces in Thailand. Okay, and this is the ratio of a student who in vocational education and general stream education. So usually, even though Thai government, every government, they want to push to have more students to choose the vocational track. But even though they have a lot of policy and promotion, but as the years go by, the number of students in vocational track, even the window, they become smaller. So this is one of the issues that we want to fix, because there are a lot of needs for vocational college or vocational graduate students that Thailand does not produce enough for the need of the industry. Okay, we just go. So this is quite interesting as well. So this is the another issue that people almost like to complain about the Ministry of Education. They say that our ministry has the most minister compared to all the ministry in Thailand. I think this is quite true. When the last time that I do the calculation, in the past 17 years from the Thaksin administration, the first Thaksin administration until the current government, around 17 years, and we have around 18 Minister of Education already. And in this government, we have 3 Minister of Education, and in Yingluck government, we have 4 Minister of Education, even though it has 3 years of lifespan, but we will have like less than, each Minister of Education have less than 1 year of work. So this has some impact on the policy, continuation of the policy as well, because when the new administration comes, so usually the focus of the policy will be shifted. And so for the last thing that I want to touch is on what the Ministry of Education plan to do, maybe under the new government or under the new education reform that they have started. So for the new constitution, the 2017 constitution that already in use. So there are several important aspects that there will be some change in the education system. The first is the importance of early childhood education. The new constitution want to cover the subsidy of students from 3 years old, from pre-primary school until the lower secondary level, or 12 years under the constitution, so at least. So I think this is like one of the positive thing that the government want to focus the shift on the student from the early age, and they want to set up the funding for education to students, maybe for the poor student or for students who really in need of the education fund. So this is the idea. However, in practice, I think it still need a lot of maybe law or bylaw or the work in progress in detail in order to make it into practicality. And another thing that the government is trying to focus is on the vocational education. I think this government, they really focus on like giving importance to the vocational. Then they try to promote a lot of vocational, they want the student in lower secondary education to choose the vocational track by using several kind of incentive. But we'll have to see whether it will be come to fruition in the future. And another thing that the government has been trying is on the teacher, which is the area that is very important, I think. So for the teacher reform, I think you may have heard that maybe this minister, he want to maybe relax the admission of teacher, that maybe people from outside of faculty education may apply to be a teacher, which creates some uproar and some confusion or maybe some discontent from certain sector. But a lot of people also support this idea as well. So in the past, like if you want to be a teacher, so usually you have to pass the training from the faculty of education. But this government, it want to make it to be easier for people who do not have background in education to be a teacher, maybe with some training or with some additional 1 year of a teacher training, something like that. And it also create the rule to decrease the amount of paperwork for teachers. So in the past, teachers have to do a lot of paperwork in order to get promoted to the next level. But this government, they remove that, and they they ask teacher to get trained or to maybe to get the training hour instead, so in order to use that hour to apply for the promotion. So I think this is quite nice as well, because in the past, every teacher always complained about the amount of their document work, which is not very related to the teaching or the learning of students. And it also focused on the STEM teacher, science, technology, education, engineering and math, and also English teacher that I know of, that the minister tried to create a lot of programs in order to train those teachers. And one thing that is very important that happened under this government is the restructure of the Ministry of Education in the provincial level. So now it creates education provincial office to every province in Thailand, 27 offices. So in the past, when the school want to do something, or the education area service want to do something, it maybe have to listen from the guideline from the regional office or from the Bangkok office. But now the provincial education office have more flexibility and more maybe coordination among education office within the province to create the education activity or the education goal which match with the needs of the people in the province, in the local area, which I think is good if it can be happen in reality. But now it just start. The order just come out early this week that to put the head of the education province. But I think this trend is in a positive one, that we can maybe hope to see something good out of it. And another thing is the university entrance exam, that the government tried to fix the system to be more to facilitate students more. Like in the past, students are very mixed up or very they have to apply to several universities that have the open or direct admission, but now the ministry want to create it to be more easy for students to apply to university. I think maybe Dr. Rattana can talk a little bit about that in detail. So I think at the end, I think I will end now. I just want to conclude that so education is good, it's very useful, is very good to society, and Ministry of Education, school teacher are all the important player for the education. But those players are not enough to make the education to be successful. I think there are other factors like maybe the society or the maybe political system or the cultural belief of the society or the socio-economic of the family. This also play a lot of role in shaping the education outcome of the student as well. So only the Ministry of Education alone or other with those players, maybe the government alone, I don't think that it will be very successful for only government offices, maybe Ministry of Education or other ministry to create a very good education system, but it also needs a lot of helping hand from all the civil society group and NGO and other researcher or private sector or maybe or even international sector. So I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Your data and analysis are very telling. I mean, especially the data, they speak for themselves, really, the numbers and the number of ministers we've had and so on. We also will put this, we have a YouTube video of this presentation, so subsequently you can still view them. We also try to solicit the PowerPoint presentations, and we'll post them on our website, and you can also have access to the data and the numbers.